Welcome to the beginning of a brand new era that has the potential to bring about massive shifts in human consciousness, their understanding of the mind, the way we communicate with each other, the way that we link together and network from a heart-centered place first, in our own communities, globally, even beyond the boundaries of our known world and universe for people who are aligned with such things, and rapid technological advancements as a start. This is the beginning of the Uranus in Gemini era from April 25th, 2026 through May of 2033. I'm Jennifer Ellen Breach. I'm so glad you joined me for this rundown of this transit that I am so very excited about today. Before we get started, a little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm a Western evolutionary astrologer, meaning that I believe that we meet the planets where we are at in our consciousness. There's no such thing as a bad planet transit or birth chart placement. Everything has its opportunities. We're always called to grow and evolve through our challenges. We all have our gifts to make the most of, and hence evolutionary, right? We always have the chance to evolve and do something really wonderful. The underlying belief or perspective, instead of why is this happening to me, shift it to why is this happening for me? And even on my bad days, right, I have a really hard time with that. But that's really the foundation of how I try to approach these things from a deeply spiritual place. I'm also a visionary intuitive. I utilize intuitive work quite a bit in my client consultations. I'm a non-traditional wedding celebrant. I do other sorts of rites of passage ceremony. I'm a, energetic healer, poet, musician, all kinds of things. Sagittarian, lover of all things wild and free, and always wanting to explore and understand more of how the universe works, always with the journey, right? The excitement of the journey. So thanks for coming along for that. So I am really excited about this transit. Now, I don't know if you've noticed anything odd or eccentric or out of the ordinary in your own life since April 25th. It's been coming up on about a week now, right? Today is Thursday, April 30th, as I'm filming this later than I wanted to. Why? Well, there have been either scheduling issues, last minute weird things happening in my own domestic and family situation where I had to throw all my best laid plans out the window and just show up for exactly what was happening. There also were some opportunities that came up for me as this poet, where I had an editor contact me, right, about, we'd really like some of your submissions for this new poetry publication that somehow slipped through my radar when it was first announced months ago. So I found myself scrambling last minute to try to get some submissions together, right? The hardest part, most challenging part of that is done. Still some work to do, but between all these different things, it's just been a really unusual week. Let's put it that way. I can feel this sort of live wire energy through everything. I feel like my body's been buzzing a little bit since Saturday. So if you've noticed anything odd with schedules, technology, communication, it could very well be that Uranus in Gemini influence. Why? Because Gemini is all about communication. And I would say, the scheduling we're doing, right? Mercury rules the sign of Gemini. It's all about your day-to-day, scheduling and phone calls, emails, what pieces fit where. Of course, now it kind of sounds like we're talking about Virgo, right? Like organizing some of the bits, but you follow all things mercurial, very affected by this. And Uranus is a planet where it brings quick change, unpredictable circumstances, quirks, general weirdness, as well as unexpected, unpredictable strokes of genius, like that aha moment, right? Like all of a sudden things are great, or all of a sudden something crumbled down, and now we have to work through that, move through that to get to what the gifts of that influence really are. And Uranus when it was in Taurus, and I think that this is worth revisiting. Just a bit of a recap about what Uranus and Taurus was all about. Taurus is a very slow, very methodical, very earthy sign, right? And every sign of the zodiac, every subsequent sign corrects the imbalances of the sign before it. So think about that Taurus nature. It's a fixed earth sign. Its job is to really anchor something in. It's to create something that's going to stand the test of time. It's about making sure you've got your financial security in order. It's things being like nice and peaceful and predictable. And you get into the sign of Gemini and it's like, oh, we're going to throw off all of that. Like, we're not going to take our time anymore. We're not going to go slow. We want to gobble all these experiences. We want to just flit around like the butterfly. Think of how the wind moves, right? Like, oh, they change like the wind, that cliche. That is such a Gemini thing. Now, that's not to say that Gemini people are fickle, although the shadow side of that sign sometimes does manifest like that. Gemini, as an archetype, just loves to take in as much experience as possible, always with the curious mind, quick communication, learning from interactions with others, fun, novelty. Uranus, again, it's this planet that moves very unpredictably, very fast, and it rules an air sign. It's the modern ruling planet of the sign of Aquarius, which is all about the brilliant aha moments and freedom, liberation, technological advancements. So you can see how Uranus and Taurus, like, it was breaking up a lot of old ground with, think about COVID. Right? Think about the work from home movement. Think about how people looked at how their money, i.e. Taurus, was coming in, how they made their money and said, I don't want to do it that way anymore. I want to maybe be at home and have more of a work-life balance. Or, you know what, like, to heck with this, I want to, move into a van and I want to travel across the country or, the world or wherever. I want to be a digital nomad. Or, people really started working more in the gig economy. So there, for some people, there wasn't this set income that was coming in anymore through more of a traditional 9-to-5 job with benefits. It was piecing it together. There are people who really just love that variety, right? So you've had that kind of thing. In the past 7-8 years, you had quiet quitting, right? People saying, well, I'm not going to go over and above anymore for the amount of money I'm making, or, what's perceived as like corporate greed and all this. Like, no, I'm going to put myself first while still doing what I need to do to survive. There's also the shift into digital currency, the metaverse, right? Bitcoin, the youth retirement home movement that started in Asia after COVID, like China and then Malaysia, where the youth just said, we don't want this pressure anymore. We need a break. And they would go to these places, and it's still happening, where they could just check in for like a month and basically live like a retiree. Or the way that some people who are really drawn to, let's say, the homesteading or the cottagecore movement, or some people call it the granny core movement, right? The granny hobbies, which as a Cancer moon, I think is kind of a silly way to say it, because to me it's a Cancerian thing. But, like stitching or making jam or doing puzzles or crafting, baking, right? Slow living stuff. Uranus and Taurus really brought about all of that stuff, right? Those kinds of shifts societally. So Uranus deals with the larger societal shifts. This is a transpersonal planetary influence. So already, with Uranus being in Gemini, I can see a bunch of things changing. I can feel a bunch of things changing. And I don't know, it's going to be a lot of riding roller coasters and waves and unpredictability. I'm already feeling a little bit exhausted from parts of it. So right off the bat, something that I want to say, I was going to say it at the end, but let's talk about it now. Tips for success during this transit. If you feel you're really in the mind is spinning, we really had a chance, I think, with Uranus and Taurus to ground into the body more, to really cultivate more of a body sense, more of an earth connection. So if you have practices that you were able to cultivate over the last 7-8 years that help you feel more present in your body, like earthing, bare feet on the ground and just meditate, or walk through the garden that way, or literally hugging a tree, spending more time in nature, doing any kind of like Donna Eden energy medicine exercises that help bring you back into the body, getting massages, eating a really satiating meal, right? That puts us back into our senses. And it's the way that a lot of traditional pagan rituals are ended, or ceremonies are ended, is that there's like maybe meat and bread or something, because it's this idea that you go out into this alternate consciousness or space and now you're back, right? You're reconnecting, that embodiment. So keeping that sense of embodiment as we go forward, as we remember, right? I had to do that today, like, whoa, I came really unhinged for a bit. It's just really important that we maintain, that we're just feeling your sit bones on a chair, right? Feel your bottom on a chair, feel your feet on the floor if you're at the desk, right? I'm going to share some techniques and some shorts to aid you in doing that, if that's something that, you know, some of you feel might be useful. So let's talk about this era that we're in right now. One of the things, and I talked about this in my teaser video, one of the things that I experienced even before Uranus went into Gemini, because these planetary conjunctions were close enough, even though they were out of sign, that I was really in the flow of that, was it's this need for us to follow more of the currents, embrace spontaneity, and really be open to the different shifts and revelations and aha moments that are coming. This isn't going to be a slow-moving, grounded, stable experience. And for some of us, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? And we're still in this adjustment period, and we're going to be in this for a while. It's totally new territory. So something that happened to me before Uranus even got into Gemini was I had recorded a whole, like 45-minute video, and I was getting ready to upload it to YouTube, and I was watching, in a different screen and just making sure that things were okay. I realized I made the weirdest statements on accident. I mean, I was saying things like the sign of Uranus. I said it like 2 times. Obviously, that's not what I know, but it's just what was coming out. It was just these weird things that aren't that typical of me. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to re-record this tomorrow. It's all right. Like, it's still before Uranus gets into Gemini. It's fine. Oh, again, right? Best laid plans. A week later, here we are. Because something else called. So what ended up happening? The next morning, I get on Facebook and I see that another astrologer that I follow on there had shared a post from another astrologer who was talking about the Uranus conjunction with the asteroid Sedna. And I really had to stop and let that register a minute, because not every astrologer works with every asteroid, or what we might call like a minor planet or point. And there's this idea that we as astrologers will get conscious of them when we are ready to start integrating them into our practice, or a client comes to us and they're asking about something, or we notice something in their chart that even if they've been to us before, maybe we haven't seen it before, trusting that the time is right for that. And there's this idea too, broadly, that we will discover a planet and start integrating it into the collective astrology when the collective consciousness is ready to start receiving the messages of that, the growth and the learning. So I'd certainly heard of Sedna, but I wasn't currently working with Sedna. And I think for me, the reason is because it touched real close to some of my wounding, some of my abandonment, wounding, and pain from earlier on in life. But when I saw that, the bells really started to go off, and I said, wait a minute, I have got to research this more. I've got to look into this. This is huge. This is massive. Because when a planet ingresses into a new sign, right? Ingress is the word for, it moves into a new sign. So at the moment of ingress, whatever else is going on and any other angles that planet is forming to other angles really set the tone for the way the whole cycle unfolds. It's like the moment you plant the seed, right? It's what's in the seed, and this is how it blossoms over time. So I knew that this not only was going to be this conjunction with Sedna, but a triple conjunction with Uranus, Sedna, and then Venus, all right there within like 2 degrees of each other, 2, 3 degrees of each other. So I was, first thing in the morning, I'm reading and I'm researching and I'm trying to put all the symbolic pieces together. And that is how I ended up, as an intuitive and conscious channel, deciding I really want to connect with this goddess archetype of Sedna. I want to connect with this asteroid and see what comes. And it was an amazing experience. And her energy was unlike any other feminine energy that I had connected with before. The way that her consciousness moved and spoke was just so unique and beautiful. And I won't go into it too deeply here, but the Sedna story is basically one of loss, betrayal, heartache, abandonment, and then ultimately the transcendence of that, and how our grief and pain lead to the birth of beautiful new things. By way of, in this Inuit myth, because Sedna is an Inuit goddess, she, in the end, ended up marrying someone that really ended up not being who she thought he was, and her father needed to come and rescue her. And during the rescue, it was necessary from her father's point of view for him to save himself, and so he cuts her fingers off the side of the kayak, and she sinks to the bottom, and her fingers become brand new sea life as she's sinking, right? And it's this amazing story, again, of new growth and transcendence. And maybe I'll share a link to some good Sedna myths in the posts. But I knew that this was going to be huge, and sure enough, it was just amazing what came through, the wisdom in the grief of her experiences and her message of really holding our hearts at this time, and what's possible when we link together from a heart-centered space. That's why I say that about linking with community and others, and the way we do any of our AI technological advances going forward. She made it very clear in that channeling, which I'm going to be uploading, I hope by the weekend sometime. She made it very clear that as much as possible in our own individual lives, that the way that we do our networking, the way that we work with technology, the intentions we set, we come from a heart-centered place first, because that's the energy that then grows and seeds everything else going forward with that. So what can we expect going on from that with Uranus and Gemini? Well, this is not an exhaustive list, and I just need to make sure I say that, because there are going to be other people who the things they bring through are going to be quite different than some of what I will say, or things that one or two of us didn't think of, right? But this is what either I brainstormed or what had channeled through in that Sedna, Uranus, and Freya, i.e. Venus, triple conjunction channeling that I did. So for one thing, big breakthroughs with technology, right? We're talking AI, we are talking all kinds of digitizing anything. We're talking changes in education, technology, transportation, especially things having to do with flight. Anything to do with flight, could be surveillance, right? We could see big changes in surveillance. And on the AI end of things, I've read other places, and I tend to agree, because Sedna, did Sedna move into Gemini in 2022? I believe that's when Sedna moved into Gemini. So she's been there a while, right? But now we have these other influences coming in and really moving this forward in a whole new, very powerful kind of way. So think about all the AI boom that we've seen. I think Pluto in Aquarius has a huge hand in this, but I think that Sedna and Gemini does too, because Sedna is all about proliferating new life, right? And think about like this unstoppable AI boom that we're in right now. We're talking about, like, I'm hearing people talk about eventually AI getting conscious of itself. All these different things that I think we already knew were coming, but really an acceleration of that. I would say like a major acceleration of that. Hacking. I hate to say it, but some of these transits are going to be kind of like a hacker's field day. Protect your data, as much as you possibly can. You know, don't lose your cash, right? They, you know, the higher ups want to digitize things for reasons. Okay, we can stay more empowered if we use that cash. Okay, so not to say we can't digitize, but you know, like maybe clear your internet browser after you make a purchase. You know, be really careful if you're, you know, putting gas in the car and you're using a credit card. You know, maybe like tap instead of swiping. Just general safety things, right? And I think that with Sedna here, like I said, you're going to see a proliferation of a lot of this stuff for good and for ill. And before I go any further, this is reminding me something I want to mention that really is going to be at play here through like 2029, and there's peaks of it this year and next year, is a configuration called a minor grand trine. So, well, I mentioned Pluto, right? So we have Pluto at, what is it, like 5 degrees of Aquarius right now? Let's check. Yep, 5 degrees of Aquarius. And so, you know, you have that planet there. You've got Neptune in Aries that is forming a sextile to Uranus in Gemini at the early degrees and Pluto in Aquarius. So with Neptune as that middle planet, you have this configuration of minor grand trine. And this has been in effect since 2025. And astrologer Catherine Hawking has a really nice write-up about this from, I think, more of like a business and entrepreneurial perspective on her website. But she mentions how this only happens about 2 or 3 times in a century, and that the last time was in the early 1500s. So we have Uranus in Gemini with this, you know, upon entry, this triple conjunction with Sedna and Venus, right? Which is all about personal connections and desires and interpersonal and like linking and travel and the way we do our communication and the nature of our relationships. We have all of that in on this minor grand trine. So the peak of this minor grand trine will be July of this year and then June of next year, but again, in effect until 2029. So this is bringing in so much of this open flow, like how I mentioned hacker's paradise, right? It brings in this open flow of all of that Pluto and Aquarius energy, right? Which is like surveillance or like getting in the nitty gritty with other people's stuff, you know, like secret behind the scenes sorts of things having to do with technology. You've got Neptune in Aries dissolving some boundaries and borders very fast, right? Things don't move slow in Aries, obviously the first sign of the zodiac, the Big Bang, right? So, and then Uranus, obviously we've already talked about that in Gemini with how fast that moves across the airwaves. So the positive side of that is that we might see some new technology that can prevent hacking, or that can, you know, give us any kind of beneficial one-up on that kind of stuff. Same thing with surveillance. Same thing with AI, innovations, and maybe keeping the dark side of AI in check. I really do believe that the Pluto in Aquarius era is the power to the people era. I really strongly believe that. So I think, and Sedna was very clear about this in that channeling, that in the end, the good will win out. The good hearts will win out. So if you're feeling discouraged about the state of the world, really try to take that to heart. Check out that channeling when I put it up here. Like and subscribe, of course, and then you won't miss that content when it comes. So a lot of curiosity. We're going to find people asking some really interesting questions, I think centered on all things Gemini, the human mind, psychology, neuroplasticity, neurohealth, right? Like as somebody who's had a concussion, still dealing with the effects of post-concussion syndrome and having met some brilliant functional neurologists over the years, like chiropractic neurology, really. I think we're going to see advancements with all of this kind of stuff across the board for understanding more of the workings of the brain, how vital it is to support that, and how we can do that, breakthroughs in how we do that. Breakthroughs in learning, revolutionizing education, absolutely, no question. Paradigm, school structure, ideology, gaming, New novel forms of gaming, right? Watch for that, especially if you're into that sort of thing. Power and energy, that's going to be in for major overhaul. Research and science, right? Because Gemini is always very, very curious. Well, what happens if we link this and do that? And like Gemini wants to know every single little detail, wants to get in there and analyze the soil and, get all the data, gather the data, see what's going on, like the minutia of the thing. That's Gemini. So scientists, researchers, teachers, journalists, these are people who tend to have strong mercurial or Gemini influence in their birth chart. So all of that is up for major revolutionizing, because that's what Uranus does as it travels through the zodiac. It brings liberation and release and power to the people wherever that is. We already mentioned travel, drones, community connections and sharing. That's pretty much the gist of it. So we have some really amazing energies we've stepped into here. I really feel that we are in the beginning of a whole new era for connecting out. And before I sign off here, something that I want to mention that Sedna had said during this channeling was about the way that we perceive ourselves and the way that we perceive others, and how the way we perceive others could change ourselves and vice versa, right? Isn't it Wayne Dyer who had said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? There's this metaphysical belief that, and I believe now it's backed up by studies, right, that show that when we are observing something and the energy and intention we bring to it, there's observable shifts in that on the quantum level. So that's absolutely true. And I think we're going to become a lot more aware of that during this era. So back to what Sedna had said about that. One of the quotes from this channeling that I absolutely love is, can you look at the apple tree and see yourself in it? Now, I'm a very shamanic kind of earth connected person. I talk to trees. I sing to trees. I research online what I need to do as a novice gardener. But then I talk to them and I ask them and they tell me in a certain level of consciousness, right? We communicate that way. But that was an amazing thing even for me to hear, like, oh, right, that certain spin on it. She mentioned a lot in this channeling about how this is a time when we can start to recognize the oneness in all things that might look so wildly different from us. She mentioned some of the sea life that, to quote her, might creep you out, and how it's really beautiful and sacred, and she holds it all in her heart, in that she carries that wisdom of the one, and that we have such an opportunity to start seeing the truth of that, really understanding that thread of creation and that sameness, that holiness that is shared, that runs through all things. So she had mentioned things like that. And one of the visions that she showed me in this channeling, that it was just absolutely beautiful, was, you can think about the energy grids around the planet. I mean, yeah, we could talk about, actual power structures, but I mean more like the ley lines and power spots, and how there's this energetic grid or template that has to be somewhere in effect first. Like, that's the spiritual and etheric structure and infrastructure of a thing that then can be manifested in the physical. All the blueprints are there in source. This is us learning how to tap into them, create them physically, create the new networks, create the new high-speed rail systems, new ways of, linking across the internet, new social media platforms, whatever it happens to be. So she showed me these grids, and then it was like somebody threw down a breaker switch and everything just lit up brighter than you can even imagine. It just exploded out and anchored in the core of the earth. And then it was as if the walls around the boundary of our planet themselves were falling out and opening the way for linking with other beings, other civilizations, way beyond the boundaries of what we've ever done in recorded history in Earth before. She talked about how Giordano Bruno, who I had mentioned in my first video, for being this Renaissance, trailblazer, very, very Aquarian, very Uranian, who had said that there are worlds upon worlds beyond the boundaries of our universe, and there's just prolific life in so many ways and so many forms you can't even imagine. Well, he was burned at the stake for that as a heretic. She said that that era is coming to an end. She said no one has to burn anymore. We're stepping into this radiating our truth and power out, which connects back to a Saturn sword initiation channeling that is also here in the videos. If that's something that you want to maybe embody more of, is your personal empowerment and strength to radiate your essence out so we can reclaim our power and shift the tide on the planet. She mentioned that specifically. First, she said, it's absolutely true. There are worlds upon worlds. And me as a person, something about me is that I am a seer into the worlds, physical and non-physical. So this is very easy for me to do. And I'm blazing many trails within that. And so she confirmed that very strongly, very firmly. Yes, it's absolutely true. And then she had basically said, the time for networking out and connecting out is here. The time for mass expansion in your perception of the universe, the multiverse. It's about to undergo major change and transformation. So the truth is already there, but it's more people getting the epiphanies and really knowing it as true at any given next level. So one thing I want to mention before I sign off here, and this is not to be fear-mongering, this is not to stir anxiety, this is simply the idea that aware is prepared, right? Informed is prepared. On the 4th of July, actually July 3rd to be exact, but absolutely in effect on the 4th of July, which I believe is the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, Uranus will be in an exact conjunction with Mars in Gemini. Now, if you are looking at, I do believe it's the Sibley chart, maybe don't quote me exactly because I'm not real well versed in mundane astrology, but I know enough to get around and obviously see the patterns in what's happening, is the United States has Uranus in Gemini and is coming up on its Uranus return. And it's going to be at least wide orb in effect around the time of that conjunction. So it's like double the Uranian energy, unpredictable, unexpected, quick change with Mars right there, the planet of war and anger and impulsivity and aggression. Also defending your keep, finding your courage, stepping into your own strength. And so this is going to be a very explosive time, whether that's metaphorically, in some ways, literally. I think you'd be hard pressed to find an astrologer that wouldn't say, yeah, there will be some kind of literal explosive stuff going on around that time. Again, not to stir fear, but so you can be prepared. This is a time when you're really going to want to trust your intuition. Listen to your instincts. If you feel like you need to change your plans, like, oh, I really do feel like I need to go to the cabin that weekend, or you know what, I was going to go to this place and I just really don't feel like that's the right thing. Again, we have to embrace spontaneity. We have to embrace the information that all of a sudden, boom, we get a new download, or we get a phone call, or like me with this editor, we get a phone call, email, or the family thing happens, and suddenly we're off on a whole new track. While still holding to our responsibilities, right, and common sense, although I'll always say intuition, I believe, is common sense, coming through a little bit differently and from a higher plane that's more dialed in than the conscious mind, the monkey mind, as I will call it. We really need to, again, trust that and embrace that. Trust your gut, trust your sense. This is a really good time where if you do have plans and you're going to be traveling, or you're going out and about in the United States for celebrations or wherever, A really good time if you've been trained to do like Reiki or Laho Chi channeling, or you've received something like the 8-point star, any healing modality, you have a different way of calling in blessings or prayer. It would be a really good time to, what we say, overlight that, to call in the blessings for that, to really smooth and grace the way for more miracles as we move through such a tumultuous time of change. And even that, I think, is a wild understatement. So on the whole, Sedna had also said, and this is because of her involvement and Neptune's involvement in this minor grand trine now, that we're going to maybe be seeing technology for helping clean up the waterways or our air pollution, right? Sedna, oceans, Neptune, sea god. So different things happening with the waterways, the lifeblood of the planet, and opportunities to bring in new technology or learn new things that can really help us, I think, to really honor our Earth Mother by the way that we are treating her and cleaning up the messes that we've made, and really coming to a new place with our perceptions around all of these things. And again, the oneness. Are we really not the water? Are we really not the air? Like, we are everything. Can you look at the apple tree and see yourself in it? So from now roughly through May of 2023, and I say roughly because there is a short period in there from August 3rd to December 12th of 2032 when Uranus goes into Cancer, kind of like a preview of what that larger transit will be like before it then goes retrograde back into Gemini from early December 2032 until May 22nd, 2033. So during this time, I think we are going to have so many incredible opportunities for change. Stay open, embrace the ride, embrace the journey. How are you experiencing this energy so far? Oh, one last thing. Thanks for bearing with me. 37 minutes of my yap and yammer. Mercury retrograde is not usually a smooth and easy time, although we should be finding the humor in that, ideally, right? Do this math. Uranus, unpredictability, weirdness, strangeness, abrupt change, but also amazing manifestations and realizations. Ta-da! In the sign of Gemini, that Mercury rules, right? Gemini, the trickster, Loki, all these things. So if you haven't heard it anywhere else, I hate to be the bearer of some news you're not going to like, but throughout Uranus has transited Gemini, and I've not been able to bring myself to look at the exact dates of any of these potential transits, right? But Mercury retrograde from now until that 2033 is going to be a whole lot more unpredictable and a little bit more live wire. So expect the unexpected. Please back up your data, and just breathe. Seriously, great time for breath work, right? Revolution through breath work, right? Air, Gemini, Uranus. So stay chill, okay? Stay chill. I'm going to be doing that research when I get up the gumption for it. And if I see things that I feel like you really need to know about on here, I will share them with you. So I'm Jennifer Ellen Breach. Thank you so much for watching. How are you experiencing these energies so far? Drop a comment, let me know. If you found this video to be valuable, please like. If you want more content like this, please subscribe. Every little bit helps. And if you feel that it would be useful or a good fit for you to connect one-on-one, I do one-on-one astrology sessions. I love to do this work. I'm going to be sharing much more too about couples astrology coming up, because as a wedding celebrant, an ordained minister, absolutely love synastry, or the astrology of romance, personal relationships of every kind. So watch for more non-gimmicky, spiritually centered romance readings on here. And enjoy the ride, you guys. Connect with me if you feel like you could use some one-on-one healing. You vibe with my energy. I would love to do that work with you. It's an honor to hold that space for healing, integrating the visioning work with the astrology knowledge to really bring true shift instead of what's going to happen to me. What are the possibilities to, what do you want to experience during this time? Let's call it in. Let's do actual karmic shifting in the body, subconscious shifting. Let's see what comes through so you can step more into your empowerment to really manifest that life of your dreams in alignment with your purpose. Have an amazing day or night whenever you're watching. Take good care, and we'll see you back here soon.